The house on Belmore Street had been empty for 3 years before Danny Reyes moved in with his girlfriend Claire. It was a 2-story colonial with peeling white paint, the kind of place neighbors called a good deal, without ever explaining why the price was so low. Danny didn't ask questions. He was 26, tired of renting, and the mortgage on this place was less than half of what anywhere else in the county was charging. Claire liked the wraparound porch. That was enough for both of them. They moved in on a Sunday in October, and by the following weekend, boxes were still stacked in the hallway when Claire's sister Meg came over with a bottle of wine and, tucked under her arm, an Ouija board she'd bought at an estate sale 2 towns over. It was old, the varnish worn thin at the corners, the letters faded to a dull gold, the planchette missing its felt pads so it scraped bare wood against wood. Meg thought it would be funny, a housewarming joke. Ask the new house what it thinks of them. Danny laughed it off, but Claire was curious, and after the second glass of wine, curiosity won. They cleared the coffee table, lit 2 candles because Meg insisted that was how it was supposed to be done, and the 3 of them sat cross-legged on the living room floor with their fingers resting light on the planchette. "Is anyone here with us?" Meg asked, in the voice people use when they don't quite believe what they're doing but want to sound like they do. The planchette sat still for a long moment. Then it moved, slow, deliberate, like something dragging itself awake, toward the corner of the board marked yes. Claire pulled her hand back first, lorking nervously, insisting one of them had pushed it. Meg swore she hadn't. Danny said nothing, because he'd felt it too, not a push, but a pull, like the plastic triangle had a weight of its own that didn't belong to any of them. They kept going. That was the mistake. If there was one single mistake in the whole thing, they kept going. Meg asked who was there. The planchette spelled out 4 letters, unhurried, EZRA. They asked how Ezra died. The board spun in a slow circle before snapping to a stop on the number 1897. Not a direct answer, but Meg took it as a year, and something about a year attached to a name made the whole thing feel suddenly uncomfortably real. Danny wanted to stop. Claire wanted to stop. But Meg, buzzed and delighted, asked one more question, the one you're never supposed to ask a board you don't trust. "Do you want to hurt us?" The planchette didn't move to yes or no. It slid, hard and fast, off the edge of the board entirely, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The candles guttered out at the exact same moment, both of them, though there was no draft in the room. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute. Then Meg made a joke about the wine being cheap, and they packed the board away in a hall closet and didn't touch it again that night. For the first few days, nothing happened, and Danny told himself the whole evening had just been 3 tired people with too much wine and too much imagination working off each other. But Claire started sleeping badly. She said she kept waking at exactly 3:17 in the morning every night without fail, convinced someone had just finished saying her name right before she opened her eyes. Danny checked the clock himself one night to prove her wrong and watched the display flip from 3:16 to 3:17, while the bedroom door, which he was certain he'd shut, stood open a few inches, framing nothing but darkness in the hallway beyond. Then came the smell, a thin, sour mineral smell like old pennies that would rise up out of nowhere in the hall closet where the board was stored and nowhere else in the house. Claire refused to go near that closet after the second week. Danny told himself it was mildew, old pipes, something explainable, and kept telling himself that even as the smell started following him, a faint copper trace in rooms the board had never been near. It was Meg who finally cracked. She came back one evening, apologetic, saying she couldn't stop thinking about Ezra, that she'd looked up the property records for the house going back as far as the county archive would let her, and found that in 1897, a tenant farmer's son named Ezra Holt had died on the land, before the current house was even built, in what the old records vaguely called a misadventure involving a well that had since been filled in and paved over. Somewhere, Meg said, quiet and pale, under their new driveway. They should have left it there. Instead, driven by the kind of morbid need to finish something you've started, they brought the board out one final time. Just Danny and Claire, late on a Friday night, the house dark except for a single lamp in the corner of the living room. They didn't light candles this time. They didn't want a repeat of the first night's theatrics. They just wanted answers, and then they wanted it over. They asked Ezra what he wanted. The planchette moved with none of the slow reluctance from before. It shot across the board with a violent jerking speed, spelling out one word over and over, faster each time. O-U-T, O-U-T, O-U-T. Claire tried to lift her fingers off the planchette. She couldn't. Her hand stayed locked against the wood as though something on the other side had taken hold of it. And Danny watched her knuckles whiten, her arms shaking, her breath coming in short panicked pulls, while the planchette dragged her fingers across the board in a pattern too fast and too deliberate to be either of them moving it. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Claire's hand came free. The planchette sat motionless in the dead center of the board, and the lamp in the corner, the only light in the room, flickered once, twice, and died, plunging them into a darkness so complete that neither of them could see the outline of the other sitting less than 2 feet away. In that darkness, Danny heard breathing that wasn't his and wasn't Claire's, slow, wet, deliberate breathing, coming from somewhere near the hall closet where the board had spent its first 2 weeks in the house. They didn't wait to find out what it was. They found the front door by memory and feel alone, and they didn't go back inside that night or the next. The board stayed on the living room floor exactly where they'd left it. Neither of them has touched it since, and neither of them will say, even now, what they think would happen if someone did. The house on Belmore Street is for sale again. It's been on the market for 8 months. The listing doesn't mention a well or a name or a year. It just says the price has been reduced, and that the sellers are motivated, and that showings can be arranged any time except after dark.